A government spokesman has said that ministers are close to signing a deal for the proposed new nuclear reactor at Hinkley Point. Lord Marland said a planning application for the new reactor would be ready by December. Last week, energy company EDF said construction work would create 25,000 jobs. A further 900 people would be required to run the plant.
Meanwhile, the government's confirmed today they'll announce by March next year whether Hinkley C will get planning consent. Clinton Rogers reports on the latest developments in a long-running story.
They may not have planning consent yet, but they are preparing the ground just in case. The bulldozers are still moving, but the project as a whole has stalled a little. French company EDF had been due to make an announcement on who would get the main contract to build Hinkley C, a contract worth more than £1 billion, this week. Well, now that won't happen.
It's more up in the air than it was.
Amid suggestions it could be delayed by as much as a year, anti-nuclear groups are celebrating and claiming it puts a question mark over the whole project.
The cost of the project has risen to £14 billion. That's a 40% increase on what it was a couple of years ago. And other companies, looking at the economics, like the German companies RW and E.On, have already pulled out of plans to build one at Oldbury up the coast. So other people are saying, let's forget it. EDF are now having to look at their own books and may well come to the decision, let's forget about it as well.
EDF have dismissed that as rubbish, saying this delay is no big deal. In a statement, they point out contracts worth £750 million have already been let to 370 companies, adding, we are on track to deliver what is needed for the UK. And they will be encouraged by a government announcement today that a decision on planning for Hinkley C will be made by March next year. Clinton Rogers, BBC Points West, Hinkley Point.
Plans to build a new nuclear power station at Hinkley Point in Somerset have been hit by delays. Anti-nuclear groups say a question mark has now been put over the whole project. But the French company behind the proposals say that's just rubbish. Meanwhile, the government confirmed today they will announce by March whether Hinkley C will get planning consent. Clinton Rogers reports on the latest developments in this long-running story.
No planning consent yet, but they're preparing the ground just in case. The bulldozers are still moving, but the project as a whole has stalled. EDF had been due to make an announcement on who would get a £1 billion contract to build Hinkley C this week. Now that won't happen.
It's more up in the air than it was.
Amid suggestions it could be delayed by as much as a year, anti-nuclear groups claim it puts a question mark over the whole project.
Other companies, looking at the economics, like the German companies RW and E.On, have already pulled out of plans to build one at Oldbury up the coast. So other people are saying, let's forget it. EDF are now having to look at their own books and may well come to the decision, let's forget about it as well.
EDF have dismissed that as rubbish, saying this delay is no big deal. In a statement, they point out contracts worth £750 million have already been let to 370 companies, adding, we are on track to deliver what is needed for the UK.
Well, my lords, I'd first like to say...
And they will be encouraged by a government announcement today that a decision on planning for Hinkley C will be made by March next year. The local MP says he remains confident.
Well, I've spoken to the French. I've spoken to, obviously, the Prime Minister. I've spoken to Charles Hendry, who's the Minister of State. I have got no doubts this is going to go ahead.
1, 2, 3. They've put a 6-mile security fence around the entire site here now. It is a vast construction project, already well advanced. Yet these delays are bound to cause ripples of concern in government circles. At the root of all this is money. EDF want to know from the government exactly how much money they're going to get for their new nuclear electricity if and when it starts being generated from here. And so far, the government hasn't said. So there are those who believe that this is political manoeuvring. Essentially, EDF saying, look, we're not going to sign up to expensive construction contracts until we know what's in it for us, long term. Clinton Rogers, BBC Points West at Hinkley Point.
Well, let's talk to our business correspondent, Dave Harvey. Dave, what's behind this delay?
In a word, Alex, uncertainty. The people behind these kind of huge projects, they can deal with high costs, with low prices, with hostile governments, if they know what they're dealing with. And what they'll tell you is with so much uncertainty in the rest of the economy at the moment, what Clinton was saying just there about not knowing what price this electricity that was made in Somerset will fetch, well, that's really putting the kibosh on it. So until they do, they won't press that nuclear button.
The trouble is the uncertainty's everywhere at the moment, isn't there? We move to another source of energy, wind power, and you've been speaking to one of the leading companies in the West. Are they feeling more confident?
Not really, no. I've been talking to Dale Vince from Stroud, who set up Ecotricity, which is now one of the country's biggest green electricity suppliers. Well, he took me out to Avonmouth to see these big turbines that are there at the port. Now, it's windy, but it's not very pretty, is it? And that's exactly the point. He's saying to ratchet up our wind production of energy, we actually need to get more turbines in places like this. Why? Well, quite simply, people are much less likely to complain that they're ruining the landscape.
You're probably 4 times as likely to get planning consent on an industrial site like this as you are on a greenfield site. Those are the national statistics.
It's brilliant to have wind farms in places like this because it's right next to the users. Over there we have the port, which is using the energy. It's good also because it's already an industrial site, so nobody can really complain that it's spoiling the landscape to put a wind farm up there. I personally find it quite beautiful, but not everybody does.
We've got about 40% of Europe's wind energy. We are the Saudi Arabia of wind, but we're using nowhere near enough of it. We're way down the league tables of that.
Saudi Arabia of wind, I like that. So why is renewable energy business not booming?
We are doing well. I mean, let's be honest, in this part of the world, there's a lot of people designing and making both wind turbines and solar panels. And we were 5th in the world. There's a league table for investment in this kind of business. We were 5th. Today, a new report says we've slipped behind Italy. We're in 6th place now. And why? Well, quite simply, that word again, uncertainty. Remember around Christmas when the government cut the subsidies for solar panels on people's roofs? Well, apart from making it less sort of financially attractive, it also made people wonder, what's next? I tell you what, predicting this business is harder than predicting the weather.
Dave, thank you very much for that.